Good evening, friends. Welcome to another Word of God Spirit Contact. Tonight, towards a little past the middle of April 2018, I'm going to be recounting a contact with Gord Downie, the recently ascended lead singer of the Canadian rock band the Tragically Hip, who I believe had an international reputation, Europe and Americas, but were particularly loved in Canada. And the nation really took the band to its heart. And with Gord's dramatic exit and on the final farewell tour, Canada really opened its heart to him. And this is quite obvious from the documentary made on their farewell tour, which I just watched this afternoon. Lovely film, really well photographed, beautiful nature photography interspersed with interviews and concert scenes. Some lovely shots. Would love to congratulate the directors on that just for a moment. And watching it and watching Gord's interviews, which added to what I'd heard on CBC Radio a few months back when all this was transpiring, I realized what a journey he had gone through and what a transformation he'd experienced on this tour. Having did rehearsals at the beginning, being very weak from radiation and chemo, but the doctor saying, yeah, you can probably handle this. And him feeling like he really wanted to do it, although he says he couldn't remember the words to songs, and the band members, his friends, all his friends from, I believe certainly young men days in Kingston, and some of them school too, I believe, were worried that he would, collapse on stage or, forget the words to various songs. But he really got it together and did very, very, very well. And so while watching this, I started to, as I think I said with the Ted Kennedy and Mary Jo Kopechne contact, I was made aware of something that had already happened. So I think, as I've said this in other videos, we all, and me certainly, plan things when we're out of body at night. We get together with other spirits that we know, we interact, and then we manage to forget most of it the next morning. And I'd forgotten this, and but it's obvious I made some sort of a contact with Gord Downie in spirit fairly recently, and then prompted myself to, I'm at the library 2 or 3 times a week, and sure enough, there was the new documentary sitting there on the new movie shelf. And when we're in spirit, we kind of know what we're going to be up to in the next little while here on Earth. And I'd say that's true for most of us. A lot more of us than you guys suspect. You do a lot of stuff when you're out of body at night. It may be just flying around the neighborhood having fun, or visiting dead loved ones in spirit, and then coming back and not remembering. All that sort of a thing. Going to night classes on the astral plane, doing all sorts of things. Anyway, for those of you who have been following these spirit contacts, you'll be familiar with what I'm talking about. I've referred to this many times before. For those of you who are coming here because you've seen the name Gord Downie and you've Googled it and this came up, which does happen from time to time with these spirit contacts, if you're at all puzzled by what happens, then I would suggest looking at some of the others, Word of God spirit contacts. There's lots of them. And I was not a huge fan of the Tragically Hip. I knew their hit songs. I could sing them. ahead of a century, you know that one, different things. But I never, I think I was a little too old. I'd already sort of graduated from, 60s and 70s rock and starting listening to a lot more jazz and classical by the time they came along. Although I did recognize right from their first album their originality and their commitment to being a rock band. Guitars, bass, drums, singing, and no synths, no string sections in the back, no backup girl singers. They were a rock band, and I appreciated that. They seemed to come out at a time when there was lots of synths on stage and drum machines, and I was sick to death of all that. So I remember saying to various friends, a real rock band has emerged. When was that? The 80s? I suppose it would be the 80s. So I'm remembering something here. I've been remembering bits of it all afternoon. Watched the movie around lunchtime and been thinking about it since then, and it's now early evening. So I've had a few hours to, bring up all this stuff from the semi and subconscious parts of my mind. So as I say, I probably can't ask the sort of questions that a serious Tragically Hip fan can ask, and I apologize for that. I am a rock fan, but I was never a huge Tragically Hip fan, and I did not know them anywhere near as well as their legions of fans did. Although I will say my contact with Richard Wright of Pink Floyd after he passed, again from cancer some years ago, like 2007, I think. The fans' love for Gord, as I saw in this film, reminded me of the love that Richard Wright received on that last David Gilmour tour that he was on. Every gig that they played, people would just stand up and shout his name and clap and just go wild over him. And he was this kind of shy keyboard player and barely sang at all. Well, sang a little bit, but not nearly as much as David. And it was remarked throughout the tour, which went on for quite a few months in various countries around the world, this rapturous applause for Richard Wright. And we didn't know he was dying then. We certainly didn't. But in watching the fans' love for Gord expressed, and many of them crying in this film, very touching that, I was reminded of that, the love we had for Richard on that last tour that he was on. So I didn't, as far as I know, I didn't help Gord pass in any way. I didn't do any retrieval or rescue work. What we're receiving now, or what I'm about to come up with, is a visit. A visit with Gord Downie. I see myself approaching a house, sort of a country house, but not a mansion, a country house set on a sloping sort of gradient with trees at the top. Not really a steep hill, but a gentle gradient. And the house is at the top, and there's many trees around it and behind it. And he seems to know that I'm coming, and he comes out with a healthy stride. And of course, I'm not surprised by this, as I know people recover from their illnesses in spirit. At their own speed, I might add. They don't all recover at the same rate, but Gord, by the time I'm seeing him, he's definitely recovered. And I walk up to him and introduce myself, and tell him. He says, "Oh, I know why you're here. I was told before you came, you're going to make a little film of this on YouTube, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes, Gord, I am." And I said, "You'll be pleased to know that my name is Gord too." And we had a good laugh about that. And I explained my position and my love of rock, but I go back to the 60s and 70s, and by the time they came along, I'd sort of not lost interest in rock, but had become greatly interested in classical and jazz as well, and didn't have as much time for rock. And he looked at me and said, "I've met guys like you before, I know." And I said, "Yeah, don't mean to be you know, sort of ignorant or rude, but and I did say to him, listen, you seem to be something of a Canada's troubadour, and I see that now. And I mentioned that for me, Bruce Cockburn was very much a Canadian troubadour, going around the country singing songs of deep meaning and love and, you know, poetic expression. I said, for me, you're kind of like the next Bruce Cockburn, even though he's more folk and you're more rock. And he said, yeah, I love Bruce. And so again, with that sort of caveat, and we start walking, and I said, I asked him how he was doing, and he said, I'm recalling speech here. I'm not quoting him exactly. I'm having a fabulous time. It is just so great here. I'd love to write a song about, well, in fact, he has written songs about life and spirit, but he's not going to tell them to me. And because I've already said to him, listen, Gord, I know you've got songs bubbling out of you even right now. I said, but the chances of me remembering them or even giving them fair shrift on this video are not good. So I would suggest you don't do that. And then he laughs. But then he sings a little bit anyway. It's like music is just bubbling under the surface. It's like he'd rather sing than talk. And so I said to him, Gord, would you rather sing than talk? And he goes, yeah. He said, but I get that you're here to talk. And so he's saying, he's telling me about, how marvelous life is in spirit. He never could have believed, no matter what he had heard, either by people talking or things he'd read over the years, about how wonderful, marvelous, crazy wonderful it is here. He said, people just won't, no matter what I say, I'm sure people won't believe. And he said, how about this for a minute? And then he sort of raises himself up off the ground and flaps you see what I'm doing with my hands, sort of flaps his hands like this and sort of floats over the ground a bit and then goes horizontal and zooms around and then stands up again. And he's just laughing the whole time. He said, they're never going to believe this, are they? I said, I've talked about this in other videos, Gord, but, I don't know how many, some are believers and some are like, oh yeah, really? And he said, but it's great, there's other people have, got here before me, and fans and musicians, and it's great to be able to just continue on as you would love to do, as I love to do. So I said, are you involved in music right now? And he says, yeah, we have practices in that house up there. And he said, I joined a bunch of guys that were already up here doing stuff, and did a bunch of covers at first, and they wanted me to do some of my songs, and I did some hip songs, just to ourselves in rehearsal, and I felt I wanted to write about life here, and how crazy incredible it is. And so I started trying to, make up stuff, and they had some, rhythms and, chords and stuff, and we worked on some songs, and we still are. And he said, I'd love to find a way to get them down onto earth. And I said, well, I'm not the guy to do that. I'll just wreck everything. He said, I've contacted other musicians, and I've given them the same warning. And so he's saying, okay, I get it. And he said, but thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. And I said, hey, no problem, bud. No problem at all. This farewell tour made me realize just how much people loved you. I mean, I knew you were a popular rock band, but this was crazy. I said, this just wrung out the heart of Canada. It's amazing what happened. And it really awakened me to your position as one of the voices of the nation. And your album about the native boy that ran away and died of exposure I said, that really hit home for a lot of people too. I heard those songs on the radio quite a few times. And he said, oh, I really had to do that. I really felt a need to pay homage to the First Nations people and what's happened to them. I really, really had to do that before I left, and I'm glad I did. And I said, so I asked him if he'd met this boy that had died so many years ago running away from a residential school, and I guess of exposure in cold weather. And he said, no, he hadn't. He hadn't approached him. Or he said, I don't know how to approach him. And he said, for all I know, he may be alive again. And I said, oh, so you believe in reincarnation? And he goes, well, I've always kind of thought it was an interesting proposal, and people here are telling me that it's definitely a done thing for a lot of people. So he's I can see he's wondering about that. Made no definite decision as far as I can see, but having too much fun in heaven, I think. So I'm asking him about messages for his fans and his bandmates and family and stuff, and he said, well, please give them as much love as you can put into your voice. And I said, well, I can't do that as well as you can, Gord, but I will try. And so all of you understand that Gord feels a tremendous amount of love still. That same love that he felt on the farewell tour. And what's he saying? Times 10, he said, times 10. He said, it's so easy to feel love here. And I do feel the love coming up to me from the fans and my bandmates. And I hope they find their feet again and move on in their lives, in their musical lives. And I tell them about reading how they've seriously invested in pot stocks and a company, I believe, I can't remember which one. We've got a lot of them in Canada now that it's about to be legalized any day. And he laughs about that. And he said, if I was there, I'd have invested too, or something like that. And what else? He says, I come down and visit people at night, and we interact, we love each other, we talk, but I don't think they remember much the next morning. And I said, you got to put up with that, Gord. It's the forgetfulness of people on earth. It's a trial, I know, but that's the way it is. You can't really do much. Well, you can sort of encourage them and sort of bug them and prod them and say, you got to remember this, you got to remember this. And he said, I've tried that, it still doesn't work. And he's got a nice head of hair, by the way. He said, yeah, I'm happy to get that back. And he looks well, he looks very well, like almost everyone does in spirit. There's not a trace of illness or or anything of that nature. He is in his astral body, and it is radiant. He's like a young man of 28, I'd say, 30, 28. And he's, just, if we were in a room, I'd say he was bouncing around the room, but no, we're walking on grass here. And what else does he say? Just love to everyone, man. Just love to everyone. It is the greatest thing, he says. Love is just the greatest thing. It just does so much. It accomplishes everything and anything. And I said, well, I'm inclined to agree with you, Gord. I'm definitely inclined to agree with you. And I said, you can send some love down to some of these trouble spots on earth. They could certainly use it. And he's telling me that he says, I've heard you can do that. And I'm going to check it out sometime. I've been told that you can go to these places and send love from being a spirit. And I said, yeah, you can. I said, whenever you feel like that's what you want to do, just make the contacts and you can do it. of course, as I'm talking to you now, I've seen the film, but I think when I visited him 2 or 3 nights ago, I just knew seeing the film was an upcoming event in my physical life. And I said, so he said, well, yeah, I hope you enjoy the film. I was there when it got premiered. I was a ghost in the audience and watched, and was thrilled. It's a good document for the band and for Canada and for the fans. He said, "Oh, I miss those fans, but fortunately, a few of them are up here. A few of them that passed a little too early for one reason or another, they're here." And I asked him if he's been seeing other bands, and he said, "Oh yeah, there's all kinds of dead musicians here, all sorts." He said, "I'm having a blast seeing all these people." And I tell them about, on my own visits to the astral, I've seen various aggregations of Grateful Dead people playing in clubs, and who else have I seen? Some jazz people for sure. Brubeck, some Coltrane. Who else have I seen? It's hard to remember right now. Well, I don't know where Bird is. Have I seen him? And I said to Gord, Gord, there's so many people of the jazz masters that have been here for a long while. There's so many of their disciples who can play as well as they can, and with their love for them, wind up looking a bit like them. It's hard to tell. Are you seeing Train, or are you seeing a guy that loved Train all his life and plays like him now in spirit? I said, it's hard to tell for me. And he said, really? He says, I'll have to check that out. I thought I was seeing the real thing. So I said, well, I'm not saying you're not seeing the real thing. I'm just saying that's when I try to recall it, I go, And I mentioned all the classical folk. I said, God, all those great guys, they're all here. And I said, yeah, you may not be able to find them right off the top of your head, in seconds, but lots of them are here. I said, I've seen Debussy a few times. And Stravinsky's around, I know that. You go back farther, I'm not sure about Beethoven and Bach and stuff, but if they've reincarnated, then the part of them that was Beethoven and Bach 300 and 400 years ago is still here. And then I tried to sort of explain how, people can leave parts of themselves and then reincarnate and all that kind of stuff. And he's going, I didn't know that. And I said, oh, there's a lot of stuff you're going to find out, Gord. It just gets more and more amazing as you go along. So more chat of that nature. Because he's realizing, I kind of know more than he does about afterlife and reincarnation and stuff. And he's sort of going, you know your stuff, don't you? I go, yeah, of that. Yeah, I do know that stuff. But I said, you'll learn, you'll pick it up fast. Believe me, you'll pick it up fast. And I don't ask him about his family. I assume he's visiting at night, as a lot of dead folks do. And it's probably quite an emotional experience for him. And I tell him, I think that's probably enough, Gord, I said, I'll come in and listen to you jamming. He said, that'd be great, come on in. And I said, but now I'm going to, at this moment, I'm going to announce that that's enough for this contact and then follow you in. Is that okay? And he goes, yeah. And what was I going to say? So here I am announcing to you guys, that's Gord for now. He's like a total happy camper, I tell you. I'm pretty sure he misses his family. I mean, we didn't talk about that, and I didn't push him on it because I felt it was kind of too personal. And I think he's a little worried about the guys in the band, if they're going to find their feet, not just as human beings, but as musicians, and go on. He'd like them to go on. I don't know if they are or not. All I know is I've read these articles about them investing in pot stocks and having their own company, or a large share in their own company, or a company. So that's that. And he's insistent that you not worry about him. He's doing just fine. And I will add that I did follow them in and watch them rehearse for a while. And what did I see? Well, as far as I can remember, what I saw was a pretty raunchy rock band. um, Similar to the Tragically Hip, but not the Tragically Hip. There was a keyboard there. I definitely noticed that. And mucking around doing a lot of stuff, roaring into covers, Chuck Berry, The Stones, some Prince. That's what I remember, but not clearly. But a bunch of guys having a lot of fun in a rehearsal room, and it was like not too cold, not drafty, no mice running around, and so life goes on in the way that you would love it to go on, no matter what your interests are. Theirs are obviously music. But I would say your life will go on when you pass, and you will do the things that you love to do with the people that you love to be with. And so, with that spirit contact, a very high energy, happy Gord Downie, I wish you all farewell.